when Mike Talbert was pastor, some land come available around, and he had foresight of knowing that we needed to expand. He formed a committee of several people, and he had a kind of knack of doing this. People that didn't have too much confidence in it happening is the ones he put on the committee. And this, I think there was 8 of us on the committee, as well as I remember, and the land was available down Old Hickory Grove Road. Really, none of us believed that we would ever be able to buy it or anything like that. So he sent out feelers on it, and we had the property was on the opposite side of the road which we bought when we first looked at property, and we was going to wanted about 20 acres of that land, which later was bought by Mr. Rudisell. I approached Tommy Summerow through a friend. He wouldn't talk to just anybody. He was kind of a recluse and very strange person, really. But I had a friend that was his friend, so he got me in to see him. So I went down where he was cutting some timber on one of his tracts of land, and when I walked up, he said, "Are you the sky pilot?" I said, "Beg your pardon?" He said, "Are you the sky pilot?" I said, "No, don't reckon." He said, "The preacher." I said, "Oh no, I'm not the preacher." I said, "I'm just a member of the church." And he said, "Well, David Ray said you was all right, so I'll talk to you." And we talked a little bit, and I said, "We'd like to purchase around 20 acres of land down there on that piece of property if you will split it and sell us that much." He said, "Well, I don't much want to sell it." Said, "I don't care anything about selling it." Said, "I don't need the money." And said, "But my sisters want to sell it because they all want a new hat or something." Said, "I got 7 sisters and they all want new hats and so on." He said, "Go take 4 screwdrivers and go down there and stick them up in the ground and we'll talk about it." And that was the end of the conversation. He didn't talk too much more. So we went on down.
But what did he mean by the 4 screwdrivers?
And just stick them in the ground where I wanted to track a land. This would be the markers, Clemmer markers of where we wanted. So then this thing kind of slowed down for a little bit, and that piece of property was bought by Mr. Rudisell. But he owned the property on the other side of the road, and it was 91 acres. So we said there's no way we could ever buy 91 acres. So he said, got to talking to him again, and he said he had got spider bit. He lived in an old house down there on part of his property, and he'd got spider bit, and he said he was in kind of bad shape. He didn't want to talk about it. So I went back later, and he was kind of a strange person. He'd be talking about a subject, and he'd just quit and start talking about something else. And then he'd come back and finish that sentence later. So you had to be on your toes to know where we were at. And so we talked about the other property, and I said, "Well, we have to be a certain distance away from another Methodist church, so would you sell us the lower end of this property and knock it off for, say, 30 acres of this, and you keep the prime property up at the upper end, which is a better looking property?" So he said, he gave me a price on that, which was unreasonable. It was for just a little bit more money, we could buy the whole thing. So that's what the committee decided we would approach buying the whole thing. Well, Mike said, what we have to do on this is each member of the committee buy an acre to get confidence of the rest of the church, so they will tend to buy an acre. Meanwhile, Tommy got into, one of his friends come down, or a couple of his friends come down from his college and brought his favorite wine laced with elephant tranquilizer. So Tommy went to sleep on Thursday and woke up next Tuesday. And then he said to me, he said, you know, I'm just not in any shape to handle this thing right now. He said, I've got a lot of problems. He said, me and my wife's divorced, and we have some problems there. And by the way, he made his wife power of attorney over his property after they divorced. This was another thing that didn't come along as too sharp. So we went ahead and bought each one of us bought an acre, all but one person. One person dropped out. And then we put it before the church, and we had one lady, Miss Venie Murphy. See, what was her? Bumgarner. She had married a Bumgarner, yeah. She was formerly Venie Murphy. She bought several acres in honor of her nephews and friends and so on. So this helped us out a good bit, and it wasn't long until we had about half of the acres pledged. So we went ahead and worked with that, and Tommy come back and said, I'm going to turn this over to my sisters. He said, like I said before, I'm in bad shape and I just can't do this. So, well, we got enough that we felt like we could handle the loan and everything, so we went over to the lawyer's office to do the deed. All the sisters was there, his wife, but Tommy didn't show up. Well, the lawyer's office had moved. That was one thing that made it a little bit more difficult. But we was about through signing the papers when he drove by in the truck, and one of the sisters seen him, and he started to leave back the other way, and she flagged him down and brought him in. And the lawyer explained to him that what we had done and everything, that his wife had signed the papers and said, you're at liberty to sign the papers, or go back and sign all of these papers, whatever you want to do. So he reached over and got the paper and put an X on it and shoved it back to his wife, and she signed her name to it as power of attorney. It was kind of a comical thing all the way through, but we had a higher power that was watching after us, and all this thing has happened. When they surveyed the property out, we didn't have 91 acres, we had 93 acres. Well, we found out later why we had the extra 2 acres. The property that Mr. Rudisill had bought actually crossed the road, a strip of about I would say roughly 1,200 feet or something like that, 1,000 feet anyway. And it was on a little bit of an angle, and he didn't want the property, and I can understand that he would have had to keep it cleaned up and so on like that. So he bought it without that. So that left this other property for us. That'd give us 1,600 feet of road frontage on Hickory Grove Road. And we had about 700 feet, I think, over on Dallas-Stanley Road. We would have had enough frontage to build the church down at the lower end, but that's all we'd have had. We wouldn't have had access to our walking track or anything like that had it not been for that. So the good Lord was watching after us all the way. He made all these arrangements that we didn't know about. But Mike was quite a businessman. He was a good pastor, and he was quite a businessman. And I doubt very seriously if it hadn't been for him that we would ever even considered buying any more property. One of the reasons that we needed more property was parking lot problems. And we had sold some land at the back of our lot here on Main Street to the mill at one time because they wanted to build this warehouse down there. We would have had some parking area had it not been for that, but some of our board members at the time were working for the mill, and they were pressured into getting this deal through. And so that in turn made us need to buy a property and expand later on. Another thing that one of the sisters told us when we were getting the deed fixed up, that her father wanted the Methodist Church to have that property that far back, and or some of his property. And I don't know whether it was that particular tract or not, but he had wanted the Methodist Church to have the property.
All right, well, go back in time some and talk about maybe the sanctuary, when the church was located across 27, and even about the old Methodist Conference High School, if you know anything about that.
The property started down on Dutchman Creek, and Floyd Henderson and myself went down there, found that we had the deed, and we went down and found the corners of the property were still there.
And so this is where the First United Methodist Church
it was a
started.
brush arbor down on Dutchman Creek, and the property is still there. And strangely, there is a area in the woods that was still nothing growing except weeds and grass. There's no trees on it, on this whole thing. Looked like maybe where they kept their horses or something during the time. And we didn't check it out thoroughly, but I think there was a spring right at the end of the property there. And it was off of Dutchman Creek about, I'd say, 2,000 or 3,000 feet from Dutchman Creek, but they called it Dutchman Creek at Providence Church. Then they moved to Stanley, and we have pictures of the old school that was in the triangle over there in front of Kaiser School, between where Margaret Green lives and Kaiser School. Well, this was a school, and I understand it was before public schools were here. Francis Moore Abernathy went to school there. The Moore family was Mr. Clint, Olin, and Kenneth, and Gus. That was 4 families of Moores that was in this church at that time. Now George and Faye and their family is about the only ones still left as members out of those families. But they were in the Methodist Church over there, and that was after it was moved on to College Street and built there. But we don't have any pictures other than just the front where a group of people are sitting, and it was difficult at that time to have for people to even own a camera, you know. And then it was very difficult to make a picture because there were trees completely around the church. Gene Clemmer, who was a member here until about, I guess he passed away about 10 years ago or something, but he helped put flooring down in the or him or his dad, one, helped put some flooring down in the old church. The Cannon family was one, two, three, four, about 4 or 5 girls. They were real active in the church. Only descendant of that one, the only girl that ever married was, I believe, I can't remember, it's Ted Garner's mother. Then that's the only part of that family that's still in the church. But the other girls never married, and Linda she was the organist and piano player for the church for years. And she would go up to the Ballard home, which is located up next to the dry cleaners here in town, and play the piano on request for 10 cents a song. But if you played When the Saints Go Marching In, that was a quarter. So, and that money went on to help build the church here. This was a 3-station church at that time: Iron Station, High Shoals, and Stanley. The parsonage was over here where the telephone building is, 1-story building there. And then when they bought this property here on Main Street, there was a 2-story house there that was used as parsonage for a couple of years before they got it. But they finished this in '41. And the old church over there, I don't remember whether it was torn down or just exactly whatever happened to it.
Now, what was the layout like of the old church?
It had the entrance that everybody used was actually at the back of the church, which is a normal thing. And there was 2 little cubbyhole lights on each side with some folding doors, which, if your congregation was big enough, you opened that up and it was still part of the sanctuary, but otherwise it was Sunday school rooms. Mazan Murphy was my Sunday school teacher there, and one of those, and we had one of those little kerosene heaters that sits in the middle of the floor, a little round, about a 18-inch diameter stack with on legs, and you put a gallon of kerosene in it, and it had a wick, and it burned like that, and you kept your hands on top of it to stay warm. Mazan was a very interesting person. He was well educated and he had traveled a lot. He had been to the Holy Land, and so I remember him telling us about that, and that was really something to know somebody that could even get out of Stanley then, you know. So the rest of the sanctuary was the men sat on one side and the women on the other, and there was a big pot-belly stove up on the left side of the at the front of the pews on the left side. And then it went off into a little kind of a dark room. I don't remember much about that. I do remember they had an old wood cook stove in there, the old type with the warming cabinets up on the top. And they had another little building, a little brown, the church was white, but the little building beside it that they used as Sunday school rooms and assembly meetings and things like that, it was brown. It was like kind of a walnut stained building, and they had an old pump organ out there. In fact, the pump organ that's in the ladies' parlor now was one of the organ that was in there, and Linda played that. And I don't remember just what kind of facilities they had for eating. I don't remember ever eating at the church except when we would have a homecoming every year and we eat on the lawn. And I remember one time we come, you know, back then when you had a car, if you didn't have a flat tire for 3 weeks, it was kind of unusual. And Dad drove up in an old 29 Chevrolet, and we had a flat tire, and then it was kind of ashamed to fix the tire on Sunday, you know. But the preacher come by and said, "Fox is in the ditch, pull him out." So that cleared up everything. I don't remember what that preacher's name was, but I remember Mr. Leftwich. He was about the last one, I believe, that lived in the old parsonage over there. Mr. Honeycutt was in the two-story building that was on the property here, this property. That sanctuary had the church had a side door that led in the chancel, between the aisle between the chancel rail and the front pew. The church was never locked, to my knowledge, and school kids would come through and just make a trip through there. They would walk in by the chancel rail and back out to the back door, where normal entrance, and but nobody would ever go into the behind the chancel rail. That was sacred, and nobody, all the kids were disciplined to where nobody ever went back there. But they had a dummy clock on the wall, and I remember when they would have a funeral, whatever time the person died, they'd set that clock to that particular time during the funeral. Why, I don't know, but back then they were different. You know, you had the open casket, and people went up before the service, and after the service everybody filed and went around and for the last look. And then sometimes even at the cemetery they would open them up again and people could look again. But things have changed, and they had flower girls, and it was you had two honors there. You could either be a pallbearer or you could be a flower girl, and it was, people were kind of judged by how many flowers they got. You know, you thought about, well, so and so must have been real good because he got so many flowers, and it would be, the whole front of the sanctuary would be full of flowers, you know. It'd just be a tremendous amount of flowers. I remember my uncle John Shelton, when he died, they had about 12 flower girls, and they all had 2 sprays of flowers each as they come down. And I think they walked into the church after I'm not sure about this, but it seemed like they would bring the body in, and the flower girls, the pastor would be behind the casket walking in instead of in front of it for some reason. And then the flower girls would be behind him, and then they took the time to put up all these flowers and stacked them around, and then they were the first to carry the flowers out, and then they would bring the coffin out after that. And things have changed a good bit over the years. We even have some records here yet on the Iron Station and High Shoals Church. Some of their attendance records and Board of Stewards meeting, they called it back then, you know. And there's some records here in the safe on that, which, thanks to John Miller, are still here. They was having a cleanup campaign, and they had them ready to throw away, and he happened to spot them, and he saved that many. I don't know if there was some more that might have gotten thrown away, but there is some pretty good records out there. I found records of some of my people in there, and so that's about all I can think of right now.
All right, I'm going to pause it for a second.
On this, I remember building the parsonage. but I don't remember. I remember when the church was when we first come into the church. It was a little different then. We come straight in instead of off to the side like we do now. You've seen pictures of that where the steps went way out wide and everything, and
so what caused the reconfiguration? Fire? Over the
yeah, I think that's when they redone it. Yeah, that was in '59 or somewhere, and Harry and Daphne and Buddy Moore were killed down here next to Hardy's, and they had to have their funeral at the Lutheran church. But the fire is when they redone it, and then the steeple used to be here in the corner, and they moved it down there when they made the change. They put the steeple down there, and then they built this section out here in 50 something. I don't remember much about when they built that either, for some reason. I can remember on the activities building, but this building here, I don't remember.
Do you remember anything about the first Pastor Rail?
Yeah.
Who was here when we first moved onto this property as a young pastor, and he died. He was the first funeral.
He died. He was young. I remember him. He was kind of a lean, lanky person. He was a lot smaller than his brother, but he had cancer as well as I remember, and passed away. And then Mr. Heckard, Preacher Heckard, come in. Then he got drafted, and that's when I guess Honeycutt come after him. Yeah, it would have been Preacher Honeycutt after that, and they lived in the old parsonage. There's another thing I never could find out, and from the deeds, they don't ever show it, but Miss Mary Smith owned this property at one time, and she was Catholic. And she owned a farm over here in the country. And the Catholic Church don't have either one of them. I can't, and she had no relatives, I don't think. But the deed is from someone else. So I don't know whether she had her property in somebody else's name at the time or what, but the Methodist Church acquired the property somehow. I don't know. But I always wondered why, her being Catholic and with no family, so you would think it would have went to the Catholic Church.
So was the property left for us, or did we buy this property?
We bought it from I forget who. The deed's down there in the safe. But I was looking back to try to find out why and how we got it from the Catholic Church. But it was always rumored that she was going to will it to the Catholic Church. But somehow it never did work out. So maybe maybe she had a relative, distant relative or something that she had put the property name into, and we bought it from that person. But I'm not real sure on that. But
Well, okay, this may be a hard question, but maybe when did you, like, God has always been at work, as is obvious from the stories. God's always been at work, even when it seemed like insanity. God was ordering things.
Yeah.
But is there a time when you were particularly aware in your life in the church, in the life of the church, that you were aware of God moving in a special way? I know that God's always been doing that, but anything kind of stand out, like a holy moment?
I don't know. I can't think of nothing right off the top of my head, but maybe something will come to me. One of the first things I remember from the old church over there was my Uncle John Shelton's funeral. I just had this strange feeling, that, and I was about, let's see, I was 10 years old, I guess. I just had this strange feeling that, if I could ever be like him, that I know God would take me on. I remember this walk when we were walking out of the church. I just had this feeling about, how good a man he was, and that he had to be. I didn't understand then that you absent from the body, present with the Lord. And then you understood that when you died, everything you lay there until resurrection.
Okay.
That was how you felt then. I didn't understand the quickness of things.
Right.
But I remember that. And
what was it about your uncle?
well, he was just everybody said if it could be like him, the whole world would be in good shape. He was he was always so good to us and take time to talk to you and things like this. And then Aunt Vera, she lived to be 96 or 98, and her last several years was over at the Methodist home. She was a sister to Betty Carolyn's grandmother. They never had any children. He was in the Spanish-American War and in the Philippines, and he lived an adjoining property to the Summerall property that we lived on. And we'd walk over through the woods and the creeks and everything and get to his house. That and I don't know, I've had a lot of little brief moments, of you can just tell that the Spirit's here. You know, it's not any particular thing, it's just a particular time. Just certain songs, you know, will come up and it'll just, you can just feel it. But I don't know of any particular time that is really outstanding.
What's one of your favorite memories from the life of the church?
I guess really what has stuck with me more than anything else was Mazan's Sunday school class over there as just a kid, 10 or 11 years old.
And where was it? Just a kid Sunday school class, or was it all ages?
Yeah, it was. It was a group that age, and I guess it would probably expand from, say, 8 to 12 or something like that. I don't know. They had promotion days back then. You know, you'd go from one class and be promoted into another class and so on.
Right.
But I don't remember. I didn't get there on a real regular basis because we lived well. It was actually 2 miles when we walked it, and we walked most of the time.
What was it about Masan?
It just his knowledge and someone with what all the things he could tell you about it just fascinated a kid. You know that anybody had seen all this stuff and been all these places and so on. It was
Like an Indiana Jones of your day.
yeah. Now he was Ray and Ray's Hovis's uncle. He was his mother was a sister to Mazan and Vini, and he was a comical person in one way. He was so wealthy but so tight. You know, he wouldn't spend a nickel that he didn't have to spend. Now he would give to charities or something like this, or to a person in need, but he would walk 2 blocks to get a hot dog for 7 cents instead of 10. You know. But he could, you know, he could talk about anything because he knew. Well, he went to school all his life. He went to colleges and colleges. I think he had degrees from 3 or 4 different colleges.
Well,
Mr. Clemmer, Gene Clemmer's father, I remember him well. He was in the choir always, and he was a bass singer. He was good. He was, to me, he was better than what was the guy on Lawrence Welk, the bass singer. He had a smoother voice. The one on Lawrence Welk's is so low it's not in there, but his would. And when they'd add in, you know, like Praise Lord after a song, you know, when he'd come out with that, it just put chills on you. He was good. There was a lot of people there at the old church that you can remember. And I probably said a while ago maybe that the women sat on one side and the men sat on the other side for a long time. And the women all wore hats, you know, and I think that was one of the reasons the men sat on the other side, so they could see the preacher. In fact, I don't guess back then a woman come to church that didn't have a hat on. It was kind of a bad thing to not wear a hat, you know. And they when we'd have picnics and everything, they'd eat with their hats on too and everything. When they put that hat on, it was there.
Well, I've probably taken enough of your time. I know Miss Boots may want to go on home, or
Yeah, she can't stay still very long. It's yesterday I was trying to hang some shelves brackets in my garage building, and she would sit there until I'd get on that last screw on the bottom, and there I would have to stand there and push, you know, on the drill, and I'd look around and she'd be gone. I'd go get her and put her back in the chair. She got up to Hickory Grove Road one day, and then a little later she got up and was starting down Lower Dallas Road toward the hardware. And it takes me 5 minutes to get her from our house over to across the street to Brenda's every night to eat. But when she gets loose, I can't catch her. Oh, Lordy.
how did you and Miss Boots meet?
At work at Union Carbide in Charlotte.
And how long have you been married?
56 or 57 years, let's see, it's in 55. 55, that's 45, 55, 56, 56 years. Yeah, been a while.
And what did you love? What did you love about her? What caught your attention?
Well, when she come into the cafeteria one day, I seen her. I said to this other girl that was sitting there, I said, I'd like to date her. She said, I'll fix you up.
And the rest is history.
Yeah, so.
What'd you do on your first date?
I think we went to a square dance. Well as I remember. Yeah, a square dance. They used to have square dances over here at the old gymnasium in front of at Kaiser.
Oh, yeah.
The American Legion had square dances there every Saturday night, and for several years. And so that was a kind of our regular thing on Saturday night.